At exactly 9:17 every night, my radio told me I had arrested the wrong man. The first time it happened, I thought someone was playing a cruel joke. The second time I unplugged the radio. The third time, I stopped sleeping before 9:17. My name is Thomas Mercer. I spent 38 years as a homicide detective. People used to say I could solve any case if you gave me enough time. They were almost right. There was one case I never solved. One little girl. One promise I never kept. Her name was Lily Harper. She disappeared on a rainy October evening in 1979, while walking home from the town library. No witnesses. No ransom demand. No body. Only a red coat found beside the river. We searched for weeks. Then months. Eventually, the town stopped searching. Her mother never did. Neither did I. 40 years later, my career was over. My wife was gone. My house was quieter than I ever imagined it could be. The only thing that still arrived on time was regret. 3 weeks ago, someone knocked on my front door. An elderly woman stood there holding a worn leather box. "I believe this belongs to you." I didn't recognize her. She smiled sadly. "I'm Margaret Collins." The name hit me immediately. My former partner, Daniel Collins. She was his widow. Daniel had died 6 months earlier. She handed me the box. "He made me promise not to give this to you until after the funeral." Inside was an old portable radio. The same one Daniel kept on his desk during every investigation. The paint was chipped. The antenna was bent. Across the back, scratched into the metal with a pocket knife, were 4 words. "Don't miss 9:17. I laughed. Daniel loved practical jokes. Even at 68, I could almost hear him laughing. I placed the radio on a shelf in my study and forgot about it. Until that evening. At exactly 9:17. The radio switched on by itself. A burst of static filled the room. Then a calm voice spoke. "County Dispatch. October 14, 1979. Missing juvenile reported near Westbridge Library." Every muscle in my body froze. I knew that recording. I had heard it 40 years ago. The dispatcher continued. "Detective Mercer has been assigned to the case." Then another voice. My voice. 40 years younger. Confident. Certain. "I want every available unit at the river." Static interrupted the recording. Then came one sentence that I had never heard before. One sentence that was never written in any report. One sentence that made my blood run cold. "Detective, you're searching the wrong place." The radio fell silent. I looked at the clock. 9:18 p.m. Exactly 1 minute. Not a second more. Not a second less. I reached for the radio with trembling hands. A small red light blinked once. Then disappeared. On the bottom of the radio, something caught my eye. A piece of masking tape. In Daniel's handwriting. It read, "Tomorrow. Don't be late." The next night, the radio doesn't replay old evidence. Instead, it reveals a witness Thomas personally interviewed 40 years ago. A witness whose statement never appeared in the official case file. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid. Because my mind refused to accept what I'd heard. I spent 40 years believing I remembered every important second of the Lily Harper investigation. Now one sentence had shattered that certainty. "Detective, you're searching the wrong place." That sentence didn't exist. It wasn't in the case file. It wasn't on the original dispatch recording. It wasn't even in my memory. By sunrise, I had convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. Someone had edited the recording. Someone wanted me to reopen the case. The question was, why now? At exactly 9:15 the following evening, I was already sitting in my study. The radio rested on the desk. A notebook lay beside it. I had written one sentence across the top of the page. "Everything the radio says must be verified." The clock reached 9:16. The room became painfully quiet. 1 minute later, the red light flickered. Static filled the speakers. Then the familiar dispatcher returned. October 15, 1979. Day 2 of the Lily Harper investigation. Another voice followed. Mine. 40 years younger. We've interviewed the parents. Nothing unusual. I remembered saying those words. The recording continued. Footsteps echoed. A door opened. Then came a woman's voice. Soft. Nervous. I saw someone talking to Lily outside the library. I sat upright. I didn't remember that witness. The younger version of me asked, "Did you recognize the man?" "Only his coat." "What color?" "Dark green." Paper shuffled across the recording. Then silence. Finally, the woman whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. He wasn't watching Lily. He was watching the detective. The recording ended. Exactly 1 minute. The room fell silent again. I immediately pulled the original case file from the bookshelf. The witness statement wasn't there. No interview. No transcript. Nothing. I searched for almost an hour. Every page. Every report. Every photograph. There was no record that this woman had ever spoken to us. Either the radio was lying, or someone had removed evidence before the investigation officially ended. I needed another opinion. The next morning I drove to the county archives. The records clerk disappeared into the storage room and returned carrying 3 dusty evidence boxes. "These are everything we still have." Everything. I opened the first box. Photographs. Maps. Fingerprints. Newspaper clippings. The second contained lab reports. The third held interview logs. As I flipped through the pages, one empty slot caught my attention. The label beneath it hadn't been removed. Simply read, "Witness interview number 17. Missing. No name. No report. No explanation. Only an empty space where the file should have been." A voice behind me broke the silence. "I was wondering how long it would take you to notice that." I turned around. An elderly man stood at the end of the aisle. Gray overcoat. Walking cane. Calm eyes. He wasn't smiling. "I knew your partner," he said quietly. "And if you're listening to that radio." His expression hardened. "You're already asking the wrong questions." The stranger reveals he attended every day of the original investigation, but his name appears nowhere in the police records. When Thomas asks how that's possible, the man's answer changes everything. "Because I wasn't investigating the crime. I was investigating your partner." I stared at the old man for several seconds. "I don't know who you are." "No," he replied calmly. "But your partner did." He didn't offer his hand. He didn't introduce himself. He simply looked at the evidence boxes as though he had seen them 100 times before. "My name is Arthur Hale." The name meant nothing to me. "I was wondering how long it would take you to reopen the Harper case." "You've been expecting this?" "For 40 years. His answer irritated me. "You've had 40 years to come forward." "I did." "You ignored me." I felt my stomach tighten. "That's impossible." Arthur slowly reached inside his coat. Every instinct I had as a detective returned instantly. Instead of a weapon, he removed a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Retired teacher claims detectives arrested the wrong man." The article was dated November 1979, only 3 weeks after Lily disappeared. At the bottom of the page, my name, quoted in black ink. "Mr. Hale has offered nothing that supports his accusations." I read the sentence twice, then a third time. I couldn't remember saying it. "I never met you." Arthur looked at me with genuine sadness. "You did. 3 times." "No. Once in the police station. Once outside the courthouse. And once." He paused. "Outside Lily Harper's mother's house." The room suddenly felt smaller. I searched my memory. Nothing. No face. No conversation. Nothing. Arthur quietly continued. "Your partner always insisted you had an exceptional memory." He was right. "So tell me something." He leaned forward. "Why can't you remember me?" I had no answer. He pointed toward the evidence boxes. "You're looking for missing files. You should be looking for missing days." "What does that mean?" Arthur didn't answer immediately. Instead, he removed a small pocket notebook from his coat. Its leather cover was cracked with age. Across the front, someone had written one date. October 18, 1979. He handed it to me. I wrote everything down. I opened the first page. Every hour was listed. Every interview. Every location. Every officer. Then I reached the final page. 8:05 p.m. Detective Mercer leaves station. 8:17 p.m. Detective Mercer arrives at Harper residence. 8:41 p.m. Detective Mercer argues with Daniel Collins. 8:52 p.m. Both detectives leave separately. Then, nothing. The rest of the page was blank. I frowned. Where's the rest? Arthur slowly looked into my eyes. I've been hoping you could tell me. What? You disappeared. I laughed. That's ridiculous. You vanished for almost 7 hours. No officer ever reported where you went. No report explains it. And when you came back, Arthur's voice became almost a whisper. You closed the investigation in a completely different direction. I felt my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I would never forget losing 7 hours. Arthur nodded. Exactly. He reached into the final evidence box, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the table. This was found in your desk the day you retired. Across the front, in my own handwriting, were 6 words. Do not let me remember. I couldn't breathe, because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had never written those words. Or, at least, I didn't remember writing them. Thomas sends the envelope to a handwriting expert, convinced it's a forgery. The result arrives the next morning. The handwriting is unquestionably his. But that's not the part that terrifies him. Inside the envelope is a cassette tape. Written on its label are 4 words. Play after 9:17 p.m. The handwriting report arrived the next afternoon. I already knew what it would say. Or maybe, I hoped I didn't. The forensic examiner placed the folder on the desk without a word. I opened it. One sentence was highlighted. The handwriting on the envelope matches Detective Thomas Mercer's official records with complete certainty. I read it again. Then again. It didn't become easier to accept. I've never written those words. The examiner looked at me carefully. I'm not saying you remember writing them. I'm saying you did. Those were 2 very different things. I drove home in silence. The envelope rested on the passenger seat. I kept glancing at it as if it might explain itself. It never did. When I reached my house, the clock on the wall read 8:54 p.m. 23 minutes until the broadcast. I placed the old radio beside the unopened envelope. The cassette tape lay inside. Yellowed. Scratched. Old enough to have been forgotten decades ago. Crossed the label. In my own handwriting. Play after 9:17 p.m. I looked at the clock again. 9:12. 5 minutes. The room suddenly felt smaller. For 40 years I had trusted facts. Evidence. Memories. Now I trusted none of them. Exactly at 9:17. The radio came alive. Static. Then the familiar dispatcher. October 18, 1979. The date matched Arthur's notebook. My pulse quickened. The recording continued. Detective Mercer has left the station. Several seconds of silence followed. Then, car tires. A door opening. Footsteps. I recognized them immediately. Mine. Then another voice entered the recording. Daniel. My partner. His voice sounded strained. You can't keep pretending you didn't see it. I froze. Pretending? The younger version of my own voice answered. I don't know what you're talking about. Daniel replied instantly. Yes, you do. You saw who took her. Static swallowed the rest. The transmission ended. Exactly 1 minute. I remained motionless. 40 years. 40 years believing we never came close. Now I was listening to proof that my partner believed I had seen something. Something my own mind refused to remember. The clock changed to 9:18. The radio went silent. The room was quiet again. Only the cassette remained. Picked it up slowly. The handwriting was really mine. Then I had left myself a message. Not for another detective. Not for the police. For me. My finger hovered over the play button. I stopped. What if the tape explained everything? What if it destroyed the last 40 years of my life? For the first time since Lily Harper disappeared, I was afraid of learning the truth. Not because of what someone else had done. Because of what I might have done. I closed my eyes. Then I pressed play. The cassette hissed. A few seconds of static. Then a voice filled the room. My voice. Older. Tired. Deliberate. If you're listening to this, it means Daniel is dead. My heart stopped. The recording continued. I made this because one day you'll start asking questions again. You'll believe someone stole evidence. They didn't. I hid it. I gripped the edge of the desk. No. The voice continued. I wasn't protecting the killer. I was protecting you. The tape clicked. Silence. It had ended. Only 28 seconds. The rest of the cassette had been erased. I stared at the tape, unable to move. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Inside the cassette case, folded beneath the plastic cover, was a tiny strip of paper. On it was a single address. An abandoned radio station. On the back, 5 words written in blue ink. The final broadcast begins here. Thomas and Arthur travel to the abandoned radio station, believing they'll find the missing evidence. Instead, they discover that someone has been waiting there every night at exactly 9:17 p.m. for the last 40 years. And that person knows why Thomas erased his own memory. I didn't touch the radio again that night. For the first time since it began speaking, I ignored it. Instead, I couldn't stop thinking about one sentence from the cassette. I wasn't protecting the killer. I was protecting you. It made no sense. Protecting me from what? By sunrise, I was standing outside the old Westbridge Police Department. The building was surrounded by construction fencing. A demolition crew was already unloading equipment. The station had been closed for years. By tomorrow afternoon, it would be nothing but rubble. An officer recognized me immediately. Detective Mercer. Old habits die hard. Even after retirement, some people never stop calling you by your title. I need access to the evidence wing. He hesitated. The city's clearing everything out today. It'll only take a few minutes. He studied my face. Whatever he saw convinced him. Without another word, he handed me a visitor badge. The evidence corridor smelled exactly the way I remembered. Dust. Paper. Cold concrete. Nothing had changed. Except me. I walked slowly past the storage rooms. Room 3. Room 5. Room 7. Then I stopped. A faded metal sign hung above the final door. Evidence Room 9. My heartbeat quickened. I had worked in this room hundreds of times. Yet standing there, it felt unfamiliar. Almost as if I were visiting someone else's memory. Inside, shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Most were empty. Cardboard boxes sat stacked against one wall, waiting to be destroyed. I searched every shelf. Nothing. Every inventory tag matched the official records. No hidden files. No secret locker. No forgotten evidence. For a moment I wondered if I'd come for nothing. Then I noticed something strange. One section of the back wall was cleaner than the rest. The paint was slightly different. Newer. I walked closer. My fingers traced the edge of the concrete blocks. One of them moved. Barely. Someone had loosened it decades ago. I pulled harder. The block slid free. Behind it, a narrow cavity. Inside rested a small steel case covered in dust. No evidence label. No case number. Only 4 words written with a black marker. Open after the broadcasts. I stared at it. That handwriting. Mine. Again. I carried the case to the nearest table. The lock wasn't damaged. It had never been forced open. The key was taped beneath the handle, exactly where I would have hidden it. My hands trembled as I turned the lock. Inside were 3 items. A roll of undeveloped film. A child's silver bracelet. And A sealed envelope addressed to me. The paper had yellowed with age. Across the front were 7 words. If you're opening this, you finally listened. I broke the seal. There was only 1 page inside. No greeting. No explanation. Just 1 paragraph. Thomas, if you've reached this point, then the broadcasts worked. Do not take these items to the police. Someone inside the department is still watching this case. Trust Arthur. Trust no one else. Tonight at 9:17 you'll finally understand why I chose to forget. I looked at my watch. 8:41 p.m. 36 minutes. After 40 years of searching, the truth was finally within reach. Then I heard footsteps echoing down the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. Someone else had entered evidence room 9. And judging by the sound, they already knew exactly where to find me. The stranger doesn't come to stop Thomas. He comes to collect the steel case. And when Thomas finally hears the last 1-minute broadcast at exactly 9:17 p.m., he discovers the truth he spent 40 years trying to forget wasn't hidden by someone else. It was hidden by the only person he ever trusted completely. The footsteps stopped at the entrance to evidence room 9. I turned slowly. Arthur stood in the doorway. Alone. He wasn't surprised to see the steel case open. You found it, he said quietly. You knew it was here. I helped hide it. I looked down at the bracelet, the film, and Daniel's letter. You've known the truth for 40 years. Arthur nodded. And I've hated every day of it. I stepped closer. Then tell me. No. Arthur looked at his watch. Not me. Him. The time read 9:16 p.m. 1 minute. Exactly 1 minute. We drove back to my house without saying another word. The radio sat exactly where I had left it. The room was silent. The red light was dark. Then, 9:17 p.m. It came alive. Static filled the room. For the last time, Daniel's voice broke through the noise. If you're hearing this, then you trusted the process. I closed my eyes. I knew you would want answers immediately. That's why I couldn't leave them all at once. You would have done what you've always done. You would have chased the truth, even if it destroyed innocent lives. I felt my throat tighten. The recording continued. The night Lily disappeared. She wasn't alone. She hid 2 younger children before she was taken. They saw everything. They survived because no one knew they existed. I looked toward Arthur. He quietly lowered his head. The people responsible believed there were no witnesses. If we had exposed the truth in 1979, those children would have been hunted next. Daniel took a slow breath. So we made the hardest decision of our lives. We protected them. And we carried the blame. Tears blurred my vision. I asked you to forget. Not because you were weak. Because you would have never stopped fighting. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage is waiting until the truth can no longer hurt the innocent. The radio crackled softly. One final sentence remained. Thomas, you spent 40 years believing you failed that little girl. You didn't. You kept your promise. The transmission ended. The red light disappeared forever. The room became completely silent. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder. They're both alive, he whispered. They have children. They have grandchildren. They never knew your name. I looked out the window. Across the street, a little girl rode past on her bicycle, laughing, free. For the first time in 40 years, the silence inside me was gone. Not because I had uncovered the truth, because I had finally forgiven the man who carried it. Some cases end with an arrest. Mine ended with peace. Thank you for watching. If this story kept you guessing until the very end, and reminded you that the greatest mysteries are often hidden inside the people we trust most, then you're exactly where you belong. Subscribe to Revenge Radio Official for more unforgettable mysteries, psychological thrillers, and stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. If you enjoyed this journey, leave a like. It helps the channel grow and tells us to keep creating stories with this level of depth and suspense. We'd love to hear from you. If you were Thomas, Would you have revealed the truth immediately, or would you have made the same impossible choice to protect innocent lives? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them, and some of your ideas may even inspire future stories.